In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys 5 simple yet battle-tested techniques that you can start using today so that you can transform your relationship with anger. These aren't just feel-good techniques or placebos. Instead, we're leveraging a scientific understanding of how the brain and body deal with the sensation of anger and other related emotions so that you can start using anger as your secret weapon instead of letting it use you. Hey, I'm Josue, a life coach dedicated to helping people in their 20s and 30s to go from stuck to becoming clear, capable, and in control. To start out, this video is for 2 different kinds of people. So let's see if you're one of them. We've got exploders, who are people who allow their anger to, as the name would imply, explode, causing damage to themselves and to others. And then we have imploders who bottle up their emotions, and that anger that gets bottled up starts to eat away at them. Now, whether you're one or the other, or maybe like me, you've been both. We know that there's a problem here, and what's great is the techniques that we're going to talk about can help both of these kinds of people. Here is a brief sneak peek of the tactics that we are going to be covering in this video, just to kind of pique your interest. Let's jump into our first tactic. So, to begin, I think what is necessary before we even take any action is to have a bit of a mindset shift when it comes to anger. And what this revolves around is the idea that we need to stop thinking of anger as a secondary emotion. Now, if you've never heard of that, let me explain this real quick. In the world of talking about emotional wellness, there is this concept that has been floated around that anger is a secondary emotion, meaning that you're not really feeling anger. Anger is more an emotion that cloaks what you're really feeling, which may be, for example, sadness or fear. And when you have a mindset like that, then the actions that that mindset implies are that what we're supposed to do is push away the anger so that we can then get to the actual cause of the issue and deal with that. However, I strongly disagree with this understanding. Now, you may think, okay, you're some random guy on the internet. I've never heard of you, and you don't have any letters before or after your name. Why should I listen to what you have to say about emotion? And I think that that's actually totally fair, which is why I have brought the person who I think is the most intelligent person I've ever heard talk about emotions, and that is Hilary Jacobs Hendel. Hilary Jacobs Hendel is a licensed clinical social worker. So there you got your letters after the name. And she is also the author, let's see if I can grab this, of this book, It's Not Always Depression, which I cannot recommend this book more highly. This is pretty much the manual when it comes to understanding your emotions and learning to work with them. Like I said, highly recommended. Near the beginning of the book, Hendel states the core emotion of anger, and there I want to pause. In this section, Hendel is talking about several emotions, including fear, sadness, and the like. And she puts this level or this emotion at the same level, calling it a core emotion. So that works against this idea that we just talked about. But let me continue with the quote. The core emotion of anger will lead us to experiences of strength, clarity, and empowerment on behalf of the self and our need for what's just and right. Now, I'm not a gambling man, but if I was, I would venture to say that the average person watching this video would love to experience strength, clarity, and empowerment. And so we need to see these things as connected and shift our understanding from seeing anger as secondary to seeing it as a core emotion that should be treated with just as much respect, and that we start to see that there are both positives and negatives. We're not just supposed to push it to the side, we should contend with it. With this mindset shift, we can go from seeing anger as something that you need to fear and suppress to instead seeing it as something that can forge strength, clarity, and empowerment. Now, for people who are exploders, this mindset shift can help you because instead of thinking, wow, I really just have to stop being angry. No, you should probably continue to be angry, but you need to be in control. You need to have clarity by using the tactics that we're going to talk about in the rest of this video. And if you are more of an imploder, then you need to recognize that it's not necessarily a good thing that you never lash out. Sure, you're in control, but really, are you? Or is it that another emotion, and this is a sneak peek to what we're going to be talking about in a moment, is it rather that another emotion is controlling your anger rather than you? And if you were to let that other emotions or keep that other emotion from affecting your anger, you may be able to experience more instances of strength and empowerment. Doesn't that sound great? So, like I said, tactic number one is just a subtle mindset shift that is so important. Anger is something that is useful, that is beneficial, and that we should learn to control rather than trying to destroy. Now, let's jump into tactic number two. So, before we get into the actual meat and potatoes of this tactic, I want to talk about horror movies for a moment, which are probably my least favorite genre. I'm just going to be really real. I am a scaredy cat at heart, and so I haven't seen many of them. But I'm really fascinated by people who like horror movies, so I talk to people about this quite a bit, probably more than the average person. And what I have understood through talking to people and watching videos about horror movies is that once seen, the monster isn't really scary. If we think of movies like Alien or Predator and the like, generally the people who are making the movie are trying to keep the monster cloaked in shadows or in the jungle where you can't fully see it. And the reason is once we are able to see the monster really for what it is, while there is a certain level of fear factor there with the claws and the teeth and whatever else it may be, there is also the fact that we can start seeing the limitations of whatever this monster is and begin to plan, whether consciously or subconsciously, about how we might survive. Because that's what our brains are wired to be able to do. And so, like I said, once you see the monster, it's not scary anymore. Now, you may be thinking, what does that have to do with emotion at all? And to answer that, we are going to be going right back to Hillary Jacobs Hendel and another quote from It's Not Always Depression. This one comes from around the middle of the book, and here it says, we subjectively feel calmer when we know what emotions we are having. Ideally, we learn to name our emotions as children, but sometimes, for any number of reasons, we don't learn to recognize emotions. There is scientific evidence that putting language on an emotion actually changes the brain, decreasing its arousal. Now, that was a lot, but I highlighted what I think are the most important sections. That is, when we feel calmer when we know what emotions we're having, and putting language to an emotion actually changes our brain. If you read the book, you will see many instances of Hendel recounting various sessions that she has with her clients. And over, she asks them, not multiple times in a session, say, but in so many of the different sessions, she asks them to name their emotions simply because of the power that it has to allow us to calm down and begin to plan what we can do, just like what I was saying about monsters in horror movies. While there's no direct quote that follows what I'm showing on the screen right now, what my basic understanding is when I've read this book, and I've read it multiple times, is this idea that when we name our emotions, the good feelings like joy and excitement go up, and the bad feelings like fear or anger go down. And so that's really cool because it's so simple to be able to do this. Now, how does this help exploders and imploders? I think for exploders, it's actually pretty clear how this can help by taking a moment to pause and recognize, wait a second, I'm really angry right now. And also to validate that emotion, we are able to hopefully pump the brakes on this momentum that is building up, this emotional momentum, so that we can stay in control and not make choices that we're later going to regret. But how can this help an imploder? Because the imploders who are watching are probably going, wait a second, I may, like, according to you, Josue, don't have enough anger. Why would you give me a tactic to lower my anger? But I think you'll remember earlier I had said that I kind of was teasing something we were going to talk about later, which was that for imploders, you generally are allowing another emotion to take over. And what that emotion is fear. We fear what may happen if we allow our anger to be expressed at all. We fear, for example, friendships that we might lose or tantrums that we might do that will make people think, whoa, that person's awkward. Like, who knows? It could be so many things. Sometimes we don't even know what it is that we fear. We just know that we fear it. So, with this idea of being able to name your negative emotions to lower them, this then applies to fear. And if we lower fear below a certain threshold, we will feel more okay with expressing our anger and therefore being able to experience what I talked about before, which is strength and empowerment. Now that that's covered, let's move on to tactic number 3. So, tactic number 3, put very simply, is that we are going to perform the physiological sigh for instant stress relief. This means that just like with the last tactic, this is going to allow us to calm down, be more in our heads rather than out of our minds, and therefore make better choices. And when you're thinking about stress relief, wouldn't it be wonderful to have something that works instantly? Well, the great news is that there is. Now, instead of having me introduce this topic, I'm going to be featuring a clip from the Huberman Lab podcast. For those who don't know, Dr. Andrew Huberman is a neurobiologist and ophthalmologist at the Stanford School of Medicine. Who better to introduce us to this topic?
Billions of people suffer from stress, and there are tools to combat stress that involve things like meditation, breath work, good nutrition, good social connections, and avoiding all bad things in life. And while those are powerful, the problem is they require that people step away from the stress-inducing activity. By contrast, my lab and other laboratories have been very interested in developing tools that allow us to push back on stress, in other words, feel more calm in real time, meaning without having to disengage from the stress-inducing activity. The best way that I am aware to do that is called the physiological sigh.
Now, if you want more context about what he's talking about, I highly recommend checking out that entire clip. And if you're liking this video so far, you'd probably also like the Huberman Lab podcast. So I highly recommend that. Now, I'm cutting things off there so that we can just get into the meat of how to actually do the physiological sigh. As you can see on screen, there are 3 steps to it. And while I've been talking, you maybe have already done it. What these are is first, what you're going to do is inhale deeply through your nose. And the reason you do this is because by breathing through your nose, it's better for facial development as well as filtering out toxins from the air and warming up the air, which causes your body to be able to more readily use that air. The second thing is that when you're at the top of your inhale or when your lungs feel about as full as they're going to be, you're going to want to force a small inhale right there at the end. And the third and final step is that you're going to exhale slowly through your mouth and imagine that you are blowing on a spoon of hot soup. This will allow you to be in the optimal position to control the amount of airflow going out. Now, right before I demonstrate what a physiological sigh looks like, so you can see it all put together, I want to explain a little bit of the science as to why this works. There's something called HRV, or heart rate variability. And the idea there is that our heart rate is constantly changing, even when we are at rest. There's a reason why when you take someone's pulse, you at minimum have to be taking their pulse for about 15 seconds to determine what their beats per minute is. And that is because, like I just mentioned, our pulse is constantly changing. And so just recording the amount of time between two beats would not be enough. In fact, whenever we breathe in, our heart rate goes up. And when we breathe out, our heart rate slows. So, what is being leveraged here is we are trying to inhale as much air as we can for the sake of having the longest exhalation that we can. And by having a long exhalation, we can then allow our heart to calm down. And it is a dramatic level of calm that you experience just in taking one of these breaths. So here's me demonstrating what this looks like all put together. How long did that take? What? 10, 15 seconds? And yet, if you followed along or have done this exercise at any point in this section, then you're probably feeling the same grounded and almost like heavier, but in a good way feeling that I am. Now, while this technique can help us just to reduce any negative emotions that we're feeling by bringing us back to a sense of calm, this specifically, as you can probably guess, helps exploders by helping them to reduce their level of anger, and imploders by helping them to reduce their level of fear, therefore being able to take greater action. We kind of always come back to that idea. Now, before we move on, I want to take a quick moment to tell you guys about a free care package that I have just for you. When we are watching educational videos, I'm assuming this isn't your first one. When we watch educational videos, there is such gold that we get from them, and yet so often we don't put these things into action. There are various reasons for this, and I think the primary one is that we simply forget. And so when you're watching my videos or anybody else's videos where it's educational, where it's practical, I highly recommend taking notes. However, it may be the case that you're watching this video while you're driving, and hopefully, if you're driving, you're only listening to it, but you could be doing all sorts of things such as driving, cleaning the house, taking care of kids, whatever it may be. Now, because I believe that the things discussed in this video are so useful, I've put together a pack of enhanced notes that covers everything that we talk about in this video and more so that you can be fully equipped to be able to handle the problem that we're talking about today. If you're interested in snagging your own copy of these notes, then all you have to do is go to the link in the pinned comment and click that so that you can gain access. Additionally, if you have any questions on anything that I'm talking about in this video or in any video, or even outside of any of the topics that I cover in my videos, I want to give you the opportunity to get those questions answered. And so, what I would recommend, while you can leave a comment here, I may or may not see it. The best way to get direct contact with me is by going to the description and clicking on the link there, and that will allow you to join my free school community. Now, with that little plug out of the way, we're going to jump over to tactic number 4. For tactic number 4, we're going to be learning about the benefits of long form cardio and why you should incorporate them into your life. One of my favorite bands, The Smiths, has a song called Still Ill, where the lead singer, Morrissey, says, "Does the body rule the mind, or does the mind rule the body?" Now, while in the 80s, when this song came out, we may not have known the answer to this. Thankfully, because of scientific advancements, now we do. And the answer is that it's actually a bit of a two-way street. Let me give you a couple of examples to hammer home the point. Let's say you're watching a movie and there happens to be a sad scene in it. There's nothing that's happening to your body, and yet simply by taking in the visuals and the audio that is coming from the movie, that can cause us to feel sad, which may look in the body like feeling heavier, breathing slower, and maybe even crying. Inversely, if you are someone who suffers from chronic pain, then you may feel sad because of the predicament and maybe fearful that things may not get better, along with a host of other negative emotions. If you were to go to a chiropractor and they were able to provide you relief, even if it was just temporary, you may find that your emotions completely flip and you suddenly feel joyful and excited for the future. Now, the question is, how can we use what we've just learned to solve the problem that we're discussing? Experiencing heightened levels of anger or fear may cause us to exhibit physical symptoms such as sweating, tightening of the body, and a raised heart rate. I sound like a pharmaceutical commercial, don't I? Well, what is really interesting is that we can cause our bodies to feel the same way on purpose outside of emotions using this two-way street that we've just talked about. And we can do that through exercise. Now, while many exercises can cause these physical symptoms, I highly recommend long form cardio for the sake that you are in this sort of heightened bodily state for a long period of time, which in a sense signals to your brain and body we are not in danger. Nothing bad is happening here. And in fact, good things are happening right now. And I am in control of the situation. I believe that incorporating long form cardio into our lives allows us to be more in control when our bodies are experiencing these symptoms, not due to the exercise, but rather due to these heightened levels of emotion. Instead of feeling out of sorts, we go, oh, I've done this before. I'm okay. I don't have to freak out. I don't have to get overwhelmed. I am in control. When it comes to practical steps that you can take, I highly recommend trying out running, swimming, and cycling. My favorite being cycling because I already own a bike. It's not hard on your joints, and I really feel like I'm moving when I do it, which feels really good, especially when paired with my favorite hardcore music. However, if none of these options are on the table for you, or there's a time crunch, or many other reasons, I would also recommend kind of having sort of exercise snacks where you do jumping jacks or jump rope, which can pretty quickly get your heart rate up. Ideally, you incorporate both long form and short form cardio into your life for emotional reasons and also for all the physical health benefits. Now let's jump over to tactic number 5. This one is arguably the simplest of the bunch. However, I think it is also the most easily misunderstood, which is why I have the asterisk, because I'm not simply telling you, hey, journal. I want to clarify a few misconceptions that are related to journaling so that you can have the best transformative experience possible. If you thought that our last quote really came out of left field, you are not ready for this next one, which actually comes to us from Dumbledore of all people. He says, I sometimes find, and I'm sure you know the feeling, that I simply have too many thoughts and memories crammed into my mind. At these times, I use the pensieve. I pour the contents of my mind into it and then examine them by moonlight, as it were. When I first read this book, which actually was pretty recently, I was reading this and going, oh my goodness, this sounds exactly like journaling. And when we start to see it with that light, at least fans of the books and movies will go, wow, like that's something I really want to get into. This is kind of intriguing now. Just like with the pensieve, you can go back into your memories. That's what it feels like whenever I go back and read my journal. And I've been journaling, by the way, for about I started in 2014. So you can do the math based on when you're watching this. But at the time that we're filming this, I am working on my 11th year doing this. And so I don't really need another expert, but it is good to have Dumbledore on my side for this one. As mentioned in the quote, it is very easy to have too many thoughts and memories, to have all of these things swirling around in your brain, especially when we're also throwing in strong emotions to the point where we're not able to think clearly. And what I recommend is pouring the contents of your mind into a journal. I think there's a reason why before the pensieve was ever introduced, we got to see Tom Riddle's diary, which works in largely the same way. Now, while this has maybe thrown a new coat of paint on an old idea, that will only take you so far if you then try to journal in the way that you've maybe tried before. So, this is where I want to get into clarifying a few misconceptions that I think cause people to not have the best of times. The first practical point is that we should be okay with journaling messily, meaning that it doesn't have to look nice, even to yourself. That is totally okay. What we really need to be doing is just getting these thoughts and feelings out of our head and onto paper. Naturally, our brains will jump not from A to B to C, but from A to X to T to W to all over the place. And this causes us not to be able to think clearly. Now, when we just kind of like let that all out, when we pour the contents of our mind into a journal, we're then able to be able to then look at it and go, huh, now that I'm reading back through it, I can kind of see that these sorts of things need to be reorganized for greater clarity. And this gets us to the second point, which is journaling in drafts. Just get it all out on paper. And then once you do that, you will then be able to start untangling the mess and getting a really good understanding of what it is that you're thinking, what it is that you're feeling. And when you have that clarity, you can then move forward with confidence. Our third and final point goes against this idea that we have to journal every day. There is a sort of romance about having inhuman consistency on things, and I think that consistency can get us a lot, but the desire for consistency should not be so great that when we fail to get to that, we then quit altogether. In fact, though I have been journaling since 2014, I am nowhere close to having been journaling every single day. Sometimes there are months in between when I journal. And I remember I would start my journal saying, man, I'm looking at this thing and I realized that I haven't journaled since October. I feel so bad. And I would just be kind of like whipping myself for not adhering to this ideal. And yet, once I moved past that, and once I just got into whatever brought me to journaling that day, I was able to get pretty much all of the benefits that I would have gotten either way. And so instead of feeling that we need to journal every day, journal just when you need it. Treat it like a band aid. You don't wake up every morning and put on a band aid. You don't wake up every morning and take a cough drop, like just in case. You do these things when you need them. And this is how we should see journaling too. Because when we do that, we will then find ourselves journaling more than we would have because we're taking off these restraints that really just don't need to be there. Now, how does this help exploders? Well, instead of letting every little thing just send you into a fury, you can better determine, is this something that I need to actually blow up over? Because sometimes there are things. Or is this something that I just needed to express? Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's annoying. But really, it would be much better if I just didn't handle it. Or if I handled it in this way, that then becomes clear simply by putting your thoughts on paper. The benefits for imploders are similar but also different. Instead of bottling up your emotion, you get to let it out, but in a way that is actually not scary at all, which is just putting it on paper. You can feel like you've expressed yourself, and for some things, that is enough. For some of them, putting it down on paper is not enough, and what we really need to do is take action in the world. This can make it so that expressing your thoughts to the people who need to hear them can be less of a frightening experience because you have, in a sense, a solid built up case in your favor. You know the points you want to make, and you're less likely to deviate or give up because of confusion or fear or whatever it may be. You have clarity, and so you can now experience the strength and empowerment that we talked about earlier. We are now at the end of this video, but right before you go, I want to just do a quick summary of the action steps that you can take to radically improve your life. So the first thing is to download new anger software. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean just shifting your mindset. I just wanted to have some a cool way of expressing that. Now, if you were nodding along and paying attention, especially during tactic one, where you go, huh, anger actually does have its positive aspects, then what's great is you've actually already done that one. So, the next thing is to name your emotions so that you can tame them. Name it to tame it is a pretty snazzy way of kind of remembering that. Then taking at least one physiological sigh. We didn't touch on this earlier, but you can take more than one if you want, if you have the time, or if you feel the need. The next thing is getting into cardio. Short form and long form can work, but long form is preferred for the reasons that we mentioned. Journaling for clarity and only doing it when you need it. And our last two steps, kind of bonus steps, are to steal the notes that I talked about earlier that you can find in the pinned comment and to join the community to connect with me and other people who are working on improving their lives. Now, I realize I'm putting a lot on your plate, and frankly, I'm doing that on purpose for two reasons. The first is that I don't want to just kind of improve your situation. I want to absolutely destroy this problem so that you never have to deal with it again. And the second reason is because most of you are probably not going to take advantage of every single one of these things, and that's okay. Maybe you don't need to find the results that you're looking for. However, if you find that you implement some and they work, but they don't give you everything that you need, then you can come back and use more of these. So, with all that done, I have given you a bunch of tactics to improve your life. Now, it's your turn.